Can you believe it? A woman frantically ran up to a truck driver on the side of the road, begging for help, saying someone was trying to kill her. The truck driver looked confused because the person chasing her was a police officer. The officer claimed the woman was a fugitive murderer and that the body in her car was her victim. But the woman denied it, insisting that the cop was the real killer. So, who was telling the truth? The story begins with Lisa driving down a deserted highway, heading to see her boyfriend. Just moments ago, she had a heated argument with her father, who accused her of bringing shame to the family after being arrested for theft. In his anger, he even got physical. Furious, Lisa stormed out, determined to move in with her boyfriend. On the way, her sister called, pleading with her not to go, warning that her boyfriend wasn't trustworthy. But Lisa, still upset, snapped back, saying she would rather die than go home. She stopped at a gas station to refuel, and that's when a man in a police uniform approached her, striking up a conversation. His tone felt more like an interrogation than small talk, making Lisa uncomfortable. She responded politely, but kept it brief. Before leaving, the man even offered her a drink, but she declined. As he walked away, Lisa muttered under her breath, calling him a weirdo. After filling up her tank, Lisa got back on the road. Seeing no cars ahead, she floored the gas pedal. But just as she picked up speed, she failed to notice a police car lying in wait up ahead. She had been caught speeding. The police car followed Lisa and forced her to pull over. As she parked, she quickly fixed her hair and put on some lipstick, hoping to charm her way out of trouble. When the officer walked up to her window, she realized it was the same cop from the gas station. The officer accused her not only of speeding, but also of throwing something out of her car, which supposedly shattered the light on his patrol vehicle. Lisa was stunned and insisted she hadn't thrown anything. But the officer didn't listen. He handed her a $1,000 ticket on the spot. Lisa protested, saying the fine was way too high and that she didn't have that kind of money. After some pleading, the officer said he'd cut her a deal. She only had to pay for the broken light, which would cost $300. Lisa found it suspicious, $300 just to fix a light? But considering it was much better than $1,000, she agreed. The problem was, she didn't have cash. The officer told her there was an ATM at the gas station they had just passed and said they'd meet there. As Lisa was about to leave, the officer suddenly demanded her phone, claiming it was to prevent her from running away. She knew this wasn't right, but with little choice, she handed it over. Back at the gas station, Lisa walked into the convenience store and asked the cashier where the ATM was. The cashier told Lisa that the ATM was empty. There was no cash inside. Frustrated, Lisa decided to just buy a drink with her card, only to hear the cashier say that her account had no money either. Great. Now, there was no way she could pay the fine. Want to know if this cop was legit or some kind of scammer? Lisa asked the cashier about him. The cashier responded, "Oh, that's our town's most respected sheriff." Lisa was speechless. Most respected? He's more like a highway robber. As she stepped out of the store, she looked around but didn't see the sheriff anywhere. Screw it, she thought. She got in her car and decided to keep driving. But just as she hit the road, the sheriff was waiting in ambush again. The moment she passed, he pulled out and chased her down. After stopping her car, the sheriff walked up and demanded, "Didn't we agree to meet at the gas station? Where were you going?" Lisa explained that the ATM was empty, so she was looking for another place to withdraw cash. The sheriff nodded. "There's a cafe up ahead with an ATM. Go there, and I'll meet you in a bit." Lisa forced a smile. Sure. But in her mind, she had already made up her mind. She was getting out of this creepy town for good. If it meant leaving her phone behind, so be it. Lisa drove off, but she had barely made it down the road when she caught a glimpse in her rearview mirror. The sheriff had pulled out a shotgun and was aiming right at her. Panic shot through her. What the hell is going on? A gunshot rang out, and her rear tire exploded. Lisa lost control of the car as it swerved off the road and crashed to a stop. Heart pounding, she scrambled out, expecting the sheriff to come after her. But to her shock, he didn't. Instead, he simply turned his car around and drove away. Confused but relieved, Lisa realized her car was useless now. Her only option was to walk. She started trekking down the road until she finally reached a small cafe. Inside, she noticed a stack of loose change sitting on a table. Making sure no one was watching, she quickly swiped some of the money. Then, she found a public phone and called her boyfriend for help. But instead of listening to her, he immediately started yelling. "Where the hell have you been? I've been calling you over and over, and some guy finally answered your phone." Lisa tried to explain in a hushed voice, but he was too furious to listen. Frustrated, she slammed the phone down. At that moment, she saw the sheriff outside the cafe. He had even towed her car there. This was bad. How could she shake off this psycho? Ask for help from the people inside? That wouldn't work. They would only trust the police. Thinking quickly, Lisa called 911 and falsely reported a violent incident at a gas station. The next second, the sheriff received the emergency call and left. With him gone, Lisa stepped outside to check on her car and found that the tires had been replaced. She thought to herself, "You wrecked my car and then fixed it. What's that supposed to mean? Whatever." She wasn't about to waste time figuring out the psycho's intentions. But without the car keys, Lisa had no choice but to call her sister for help. Suddenly, the sheriff rushed back, startling Lisa. To her surprise, this time, he didn't cause trouble. Instead, he returned her car keys and phone before leaving. Lisa breathed a sigh of relief. Since the sheriff had let her go, she decided not to seek help anymore and simply reassured her sister before getting ready to leave. As she stepped out of the cafe, she noticed the cashier sitting outside with a sorrowful expression. When she asked, she learned that the cashier had just been fired because some customer's change had gone missing, money that Lisa had actually stolen. Feeling guilty, Lisa decided to give the cashier a ride. As they drove, the two chatted about many things. Just as the conversation turned to the sheriff, the cashier was suddenly shot in the head from a distance. Lisa burst into tears, jumping out of the car in panic, completely unsure what to do. At that moment, she saw a vehicle approaching from the wilderness. Her first thought was that the killer was coming after her, so she quickly got back in the car and sped away. Before long, the vehicle caught up. It was the sheriff. It turned out that the sheriff was a serial killer. At first, he stayed close behind Lisa, occasionally ramming her car, but then he gradually fell back. Just then, she spotted a large truck parked by the roadside ahead. She quickly stopped, got out, and ran to the truck driver for help. When the driver heard that someone was trying to kill her, he immediately grabbed his gun and stood on guard. At that moment, the sheriff suddenly appeared. Lisa pointed at him and shouted, "He's the one chasing me." The driver was stunned. What was going on? A cop trying to kill someone? The sheriff calmly said that Lisa was a fugitive murderer and that there was a fresh corpse in her car, one she had just killed. No matter how much Lisa tried to argue, the driver was inclined to believe the police. The moment the driver let his guard down, the sheriff shot him dead. Lisa jumped back into her car and sped away. Strangely, the sheriff didn't shoot at her, nor did he rush to chase her. He enjoyed letting his prey run first. Lisa had no idea how long she had been driving when she finally spotted an old junkyard nearby. She decided to hide there for a while. Here, there was no cell signal, but Lisa met Jack, a worker at the junkyard. In a panic, she accidentally injured Jack, so she helped bandage his wound. Seeing that Jack wasn't angry, Lisa felt she had finally met a good person and was somewhat relieved. Just then, the sound of a car came from outside. Jack said it was his boss arriving and casually went out to greet him. After Jack left, Lisa went to the restroom he had mentioned, wanting to freshen up. But when she got there, she realized it wasn't a restroom at all. It was a repair room filled with various tools. Not only that, but she noticed the walls were densely covered with cards. As she got closer, she saw that they were dozens of women's driver's licenses. A deep sense of dread washed over her. And sure enough, in the next second, the sheriff appeared. That's right, the sheriff was Jack's boss. The sheriff calmly stated that all the women on the wall were his victims. Lisa was terrified and turned to run, but Jack knocked her out. When she regained consciousness, she was tied up. The deranged sheriff began telling his story, and from his words, it was clear he had a deep-seated hatred for women and took pleasure in torturing them. Since Lisa had been cursing at him nonstop, he decided her mouth was too filthy and needed to be purified. With Jack's help, the twisted sheriff brutally cut out Lisa's tongue. Overwhelmed by the unbearable pain, she passed out. Lisa had no idea how much time had passed when she finally woke up, realizing her tongue was gone, but now she had to find a way to survive. While the sheriff and Jack were watching TV in the next room, Lisa quietly slipped out, taking a knife for protection. But she hadn't gone far when the sheriff caught up to her in his car. He had no intention of killing her outright. He wanted a toy with his prey. Smirking, he proposed a game. He would leave a gun for Lisa, then try to run her over with his car, to see whether her gun was faster or his car. To his surprise, Lisa refused to play along. As soon as the sheriff got back in his car, Lisa quickly picked up the gun, loaded the bullets, and pointed it at her own head, then pulled the trigger. The sheriff watched in shock as his prey seemingly took her own life without his permission. Enraged, he jumped out of the car to inspect her body. But he never expected that Lisa wasn't actually dead. The bullet didn't hit her head, and the blood he saw was just from her mouth. The moment he let his guard down, Lisa suddenly lunged and stabbed him. The sheriff collapsed, unable to move. Wasting no time, Lisa climbed into his car and started the engine. Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly felt that she couldn't let that deranged murderer go unpunished. So, she turned the car around and drove straight at the sheriff. The sheriff raised his gun to shoot, only to realize that Lisa had already taken a magazine. Just like that, the psychotic sheriff was killed by Lisa. Afterward, Lisa returned to the repair shop, picked up her severed tongue, wrapped it in ice, and planned to take it to the hospital for reattachment surgery. She then gathered the victim's driver's licenses as evidence of the sheriff's crimes to hand over to the police. At that moment, Jack appeared. Lisa struck first, stabbing Jack straight through the head. With everything settled, she got into the car and drove toward the brightly lit city ahead. Just then, her boyfriend called. Without hesitation, Lisa threw the phone out of the car window, her way of saying, "When I needed you the most, you weren't there. Now that I've survived everything on my own, what do I need you for?" And with that, the movie ends. This movie's plot is intense from start to finish, with hardly a dull moment. From Lisa's argument with her family to her life-or-death struggle against the psychotic sheriff, every twist keeps the tension high. The sheriff repeatedly letting Lisa go, only to torment her like a cat playing with a mouse, creates a psychological battle that adds to the film's suffocating atmosphere. Alright, see you in the next one.